December 1944. The Ardennes Forest. Western Front. Snow fell thick and heavy through the blackened branches of the Ardennes, swallowing sound, burying movement, turning the battlefield into a frozen graveyard. The wind cut through wool uniforms and steel helmets alike, carrying with it the distant thud of artillery, dull, rhythmic, inevitable. Smoke drifted low between the trees, mixing with fog and breath, blurring the line between earth and sky. Inside a requisitioned Belgian farmhouse, its windows rattling from distant shell fire, a small group of German officers stood around a wooden table scarred by bayonets and candle burns. Maps lay scattered, their neat arrows and bold objectives already smeared by melting snow and dirty fingers. These were not young men dreaming of glory. They were veterans, survivors of Poland, France, Russia. Men who had seen victory and catastrophe in equal measure. On the table sat something out of place. A small cardboard box. Brown. Plain. Almost fragile. Stamped in black ink were simple words, printed without flourish or ideology. U.S. Army K-Ration. One officer opened it carefully as if it were a document rather than food. The cardboard tore with a dry sound that echoed louder than expected in the silent room. Inside lay neat order. Tins packed tightly, crackers sealed against moisture, a chocolate bar wrapped in foil, powdered coffee, sugar, chewing gum, cigarettes, matches, even a tiny roll of toilet paper. Nothing luxurious. Nothing dramatic. And yet, as the officers examined its contents, the room grew quiet. No one spoke because no one needed to. In that instant, standing at the height of Germany's last great offensive, they understood a truth that no intelligence report, no battlefield success, no act of courage could hide any longer. They had already lost the war. Not because their soldiers lacked bravery. Not because their generals lacked skill. Not even because their weapons were inferior. They were losing because they were fighting a different kind of enemy. For years, the world had believed that Nazi Germany represented the pinnacle of modern warfare. Blitzkrieg, lightning war, had rewritten military textbooks. Poland fell in weeks. France collapsed in days. Armored columns, close air support and ruthless coordination had stunned the world into awe and fear. Germany's officers were taught that wars were decided by decisive blows, by speed, discipline, and genius. Across the Atlantic, the United States appeared to be something else entirely. Too large. Too slow. Too comfortable. A nation of factories and farms, immigrants and consumers. A society critics dismissed as soft, distracted by abundance, unprepared for sacrifice. Even within Germany's high command, many believed that while America could build machines, it could not endure hardship. That its soldiers, spoiled by comfort, would break under pressure. The K-Ration shattered that illusion. Because this small box was not merely food. It was evidence of a system. By late 1944, more than 8 million American soldiers were deployed across the globe, from the hedgerows of Normandy to the islands of the Pacific, from North Africa to the frozen forests of Belgium. Every one of them needed to eat every day under fire, in motion, in chaos. Feeding such an army was not an act of bravery. It was an act of organization on a scale the world had never seen. The K-Ration had been designed years earlier, not by a general but by a scientist. Ansel Keys, a physiologist tasked with a simple but radical question. How do you feed a soldier anywhere, anytime without failure? The answer was not elegance. It was standardization. Calories calculated. Packaging optimized. Production simplified. Distribution planned months in advance. Each box was identical. That sameness was the point. Germany, by contrast, had never planned for a long war. Its economy was built on conquest, not sustainability. Food was seized from occupied lands. Fuel depended on vulnerable supply routes. Logistics were improvised, stretched, and eventually shattered by Allied bombing and overextension, especially after the catastrophic losses in the Soviet Union. By 1944, German soldiers were hungry. Rations were reduced. Bread was scarce. Meat was rare. Coffee was a memory. Soldiers scavenged, traded, stole, anything to survive. When German units captured American supplies, they didn't just take ammunition or fuel. They took food. Because food meant endurance. And endurance meant belief. The Ardennes offensive, Hitler's last gamble, was meant to reverse the war's momentum. It aimed to split Allied lines, capture Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. On paper it was bold. On maps it looked decisive. But paper does not move armies. Fuel does. Food does. Logistics do. As German tanks stalled for lack of gasoline, American supply columns pushed forward through snow and shellfire. As German soldiers counted bullets and calories, American units complained, not about hunger but about taste. That difference mattered. Because war is not fought only with weapons. It is fought with expectations. The expectation of tomorrow. The belief that support will arrive. The certainty that one is part of something larger, something functioning. Inside that K-Ration box, German officers saw a civilization at work. Not chaotic, not improvising, but methodical. A society capable of repeating success millions of times without collapse. They did not see food. They saw inevitability. This story is not about a meal eaten in the snow. It is about the precise moment when modern warfare revealed its true master. Not the bold commander, not the superior weapon, but the system that could sustain effort longer than its enemy. And it reveals a lesson that would define the modern world. The war was decided not on the battlefield, but in the supply chain. For most of the war, German officers believed they understood modern conflict better than anyone else alive. They had studied Clausewitz and Schlieffen. They had refined combined arms warfare to a brutal art. Infantry, armor, artillery, and air power moved together with precision that stunned the world. In 1940, France, the most heavily fortified nation in Europe, collapsed in just 42 days. The victory seemed to confirm everything German military doctrine promised. But hidden beneath these triumphs was a fatal assumption. That wars are short. German planning had always assumed decisive campaigns. The economy was never fully mobilized until too late. Factories competed for scarce resources. Civilian consumption was preserved to maintain morale. Logistics were treated as a supporting act, not the main event. The Wehrmacht fought brilliantly, but it was fed poorly. By contrast, the United States entered the war with no illusions of speed. American planners assumed the worst, a global conflict fought across oceans, continents, climates, and years. Their greatest fear was not enemy fire, it was breakdown. Breakdown of supply. Breakdown of morale. Breakdown of systems. So they planned obsessively. In 1942, while German officers debated strategy on the Eastern Front, American logisticians were calculating calories. Not for thousands. For millions. The U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps estimated that a single infantry division required over 600 tons of supplies per day: food, fuel, ammunition, medical gear. Multiply that by dozens of divisions scattered across the world. The math was terrifying. And yet, America leaned into it. Because America did not fight war as an art. America fought war as a process. 2. The K-Ration, engineering endurance. The K-Ration was never meant to inspire. It was meant to function. Designed in 1941 by physiologist Ancel Keys, the K-Ration was intended for short-term combat use. Airborne troops, armored crews, soldiers on the move. Each daily ration came in 3 small boxes: breakfast, dinner, supper. Together they provided roughly 3,000 calories, enough to keep a soldier alive, alert, and moving. But the real innovation wasn't nutrition. It was standardization. Every K-Ration was identical. Every item interchangeable. Packaging was optimized for shipping, stacking, and durability. Ingredients were chosen not for taste but for shelf life. Factories across the country could produce components without customization. This meant one thing: scale. By 1944, American factories were producing millions of rations per week. They moved by rail, truck, ship, and aircraft in a seamless flow that rarely stopped. No improvisation. No begging local civilians. No hope-based planning. Just delivery. Germany had no equivalent system. Its rations varied by unit, region, and availability. As Allied bombing intensified, rail lines shattered. Fuel shortages crippled transport. What food existed often never reached the front. The result was predictable. German soldiers fought hungry. American soldiers fought fed. 3. The Ardennes, when reality arrived. The Ardennes offensive, launched on December 16, 1944, was meant to shock the Allies into collapse. German forces achieved initial surprise. Snow grounded Allied air power. American lines buckled. But almost immediately the offensive began consuming itself. German armored units advanced faster than their supplies. Fuel dumps were missed. Trucks broke down. Horses, still widely used by the Wehrmacht, collapsed in the snow. Soldiers carried ammunition but lacked calories. Meanwhile, American supply systems adapted. When roads clogged, engineers built new ones. When trucks were destroyed, replacements arrived. When units were encircled, like the 101st Airborne at Bastogne, supplies were dropped from the air. Food arrived with ammunition. That mattered more than any tank. Captured German diaries from the battle revealed despair not at enemy strength, but at enemy reliability. One entry reads, "They appear endlessly resupplied. We fight the same men again and again, never weakened." This was the psychological turning point, because soldiers can endure danger. They cannot endure hopelessness. 4. Confrontation, two worlds at war. As German units captured American supply caches, something strange happened. They stopped celebrating victories. Instead they looted. K-Rations became prized items. Not because they tasted good, many Americans hated them, but because they were complete. Crackers, protein, sugar, caffeine. Everything a soldier needed reliably. German officers noticed something else. American soldiers expected to be resupplied. They planned their lives around it. They complained about cold, mud, boredom, but not hunger. That confidence translated into aggression. American commanders took risks because they trusted logistics. German commanders hesitated because they feared running out. The battlefield tilted. The human voices, small truths. A U.S. medic remembered. We could always make coffee. Even under fire. That did something to the men. A German corporal recalled after the war. When we ate American food, it felt like cheating time itself. Letters home from German soldiers increasingly mentioned hunger. Letters from Americans mentioned monotony. That difference was decisive. 6. The numbers, war as arithmetic. By the end of 1944, the U.S. Army moved over 12 million tons of supplies across Europe. The Red Ball Express alone delivered 400,000 tons per month. Germany's fuel reserves were nearly exhausted. Average German caloric intake at the front dropped below 2,000 calories. Wars are fought by men, but they are won by math. 7. Consequences, collapse from within. As 1945 began, German resistance stiffened in places, but belief had evaporated. Soldiers fought because they had to, not because they expected victory. American troops advanced with exhaustion, but certainty. The K-Ration symbolized that certainty. A future that arrived daily in a box. 8. Reflection, the new face of power. This was the moment warfare changed forever. Victory no longer belonged to the boldest charge, but to the society that could repeat success endlessly. The German officers in that farmhouse did not surrender that day. But they understood. The war had already been decided, somewhere far from the front, in factories, rail yards, and warehouses. And no battlefield heroics could change that. When the war in Europe finally ended in May 1945, the world counted its dead, measured its ruins, and searched for meaning in the wreckage. Cities lay shattered. Borders were redrawn. Empires collapsed under the weight of their own ambitions. Yet the most important lesson of the war did not roar across the skies in flames, nor thunder across fields in steel. It sat quietly in a cardboard box. The German officers who had opened the American K-Ration in the winter of 1944 did not record the moment in official reports. There were no medals awarded for the realization they experienced. But in hindsight, it was one of the most honest moments of the entire conflict. The instant when illusion gave way to understanding. They had not been beaten by superior courage. They had not been defeated by tactical genius alone. They had been outlasted. For centuries, power had been measured by armies in the field, by banners, formations, and decisive battles. Victory belonged to those who could strike hardest and fastest. But the Second World War exposed the limits of that worldview. It revealed that modern war was not merely a contest of will, but a test of civilization itself. Which society could organize complexity, which could endure disruption, which could sustain effort without collapse. Germany, for all its discipline and innovation, had built its war machine on conquest and improvisation. It relied on speed because it could not survive delay. Its victories demanded constant motion, constant success. The moment momentum slowed, in the vastness of Russia, in the skies over Germany, in the snow of the Ardennes, the system began to fracture. America was different. The United States did not fight with elegance. It fought with redundancy. It assumed failure, delay, loss, and built systems that could absorb them. If one factory burned, another replaced it. If one convoy was sunk, another followed. If one unit was cut off, supplies arrived by air. This was not romantic warfare. It was resilient warfare. The K-Ration symbolized that resilience. It was not a triumph of flavor or comfort. Many soldiers despised its taste. But they trusted it. And trust in war is a form of power. A soldier who trusts tomorrow fights differently than one who doubts it. In post-war interviews, former German officers would often speak with admiration and bitterness about American logistics. They marveled at the scale, the consistency, the calm inevitability of it. Some would later help rebuild Germany's own industrial systems, applying the very lessons that had once defeated them. This is the great irony of the war. The defeated learned. The victors moved on. And in that movement the world was remade. The logistical principles that fed American armies soon fed civilian life. Standardization became efficiency. Supply chains stretched across oceans. Warehouses replaced battlefields as centers of power. The modern global economy was born from the same logic that filled those ration boxes. But victory carried its own cost. Industrialized war stripped conflict of intimacy. Decisions made in offices and factories now determine life and death thousands of miles away. The human face of war became easier to forget, hidden behind numbers, schedules, and shipments. The German officers in that farmhouse did not see the future clearly. But they sensed it. They sensed that war, and power itself, had changed forever. One of them reportedly said nothing at all. He simply closed the box, placed the contents back inside, and set it gently on the table. As if acknowledging something larger than defeat. As if recognizing inevitability. That image lingers. A war measured not by explosions but by preparation. A defeat recognized not by surrender, but by understanding. Today the battlefields have changed. But the lesson remains. Nations rise and fall not only by the strength of their weapons, but by the strength of their systems. Not by moments of brilliance, but by the ability to endure strain, adapt to chaos, and deliver consistency under pressure. In the end, the German officers did not lose because they lacked bravery. They lost because they faced an enemy who could keep going. And in that quiet realization, inside a simple cardboard box, the modern world revealed its most powerful truth. The greatest force in history is not destruction but sustainment.